Welcome to this explainer on the Correspondence, Reading the Gap. So, today we're unpacking this absolutely fascinating literary mystery. We're going to explore how the simple act of reading is actually the ultimate bridge between isolated individuals. Seriously, if you've ever felt a profound, almost unexplainable connection to an author or even another reader over shared text, well, what we're about to look at maps out exactly why that happens. Let's get right into it.
Every book is a correspondence between someone who is no longer present and someone who has not yet arrived. Think about that for a second. It's a profoundly beautiful idea, right? It actually comes from an unidentified, undated note that was just tucked away inside a library book in Austria. The core idea here is that reading isn't just some passive consumption, it's practically a physical space. And this space has its own temperature, the temperature of attention itself. Essentially, when you sit down to read, you are literally completing what the writer began.
But what happens when two people try to read a book that might not even exist? That's the wild literary mystery right at the heart of our source text. It's a story about two isolated people who somehow meet over a book neither of them has ever actually read. It pulls us directly into this shadowy, kind of obsessive world of orphan scholarship. And it asks this brilliant, really strange question. Can a text exert a gravitational pull on you, even if you've only ever read a tiny passing fragment describing it?
To understand how they meet, we first need to define something called the shadow library. It's this vast, circulatory network of books known only through descriptions, reviews, or footnotes. And honestly, we navigate this library constantly. Think about it. We've all been there, nodding along at parties, debating, holding incredibly strong opinions on texts we only know through a review or a Wikipedia summary. The library of books we've pretended to read is vastly larger than any physical library we'll ever step foot in. It breathes, It circulates.
So let's look at our two completely isolated readers who are separated by literally thousands of miles. First, we have Mara Voss. She's a translator down in Thessalonica, and her entire professional life is about reconstructing an absent original text. Then, up in Reykjavik, there's Thomas Calc, a clock restorer. He spends his days sitting with stopped time, essentially corresponding with the absent great-uncle who left him all these clocks. Despite being so different, they are both, in their own very specific ways, total experts at corresponding with absence.
These two eventually find each other on this incredibly obscure internet forum. They're discussing a 1961 book by an author named Arel Imre titled Vantage Points. But here is where it gets spicy. Their secondary sources fundamentally disagree. Mara relies on this German footnote, which takes a position of absolute faith. It assumes the book is real. Thomas's source, on the other hand, is an introduction to an Edinburgh essay, and it insists the book's existence is the very thing in question. So he's coming from a position of total doubt.
Now, the original German title of Imre's book is Aussichtspunkte, which literally translates to viewpoint places, meaning the actual ground on which you stand. And this reveals such a vital lesson. Position determines what is seen. Depth actually requires disagreement. You just cannot map a three-dimensional territory from one single point. Mara and Thomas literally need their conflicting descriptions to give this mystery book its shape.
This brings us to a really crucial point found in Imre's only other known work, an essay called Die Lücke im Text, or The Gap in the Text. Imre proposes something wild. He says that this gap, the temporal space between the writer who is gone and the reader who has just arrived, isn't a flaw in communication at all. Instead, it is the exact place where meaning and connection are constructed. The gap isn't a mistake, it's what the text is actually for.
Okay, so as Mara and Thomas start messaging each other, relentlessly I might add, their correspondence starts to eerily mirror the very book they're debating. It happens in 4 phases. First, they establish rigid positions. Then comes what's called contamination, where they slowly start influencing each other's views. After that is the turn, where the conversation stops being about the text entirely and becomes about them. Finally, that leads to the working, this incredibly deep, transformative connection.
And the climax of their digital exchange really hits when Mara realizes they aren't just analyzing some missing text anymore. She writes this to Thomas. We are the territory that neither of us is, you and I. We are not the map, we are what the map implies, in the gap between two survey points. That is just, wow. She realizes that through their letters, they are actively building a brand new, shared reality in the space between them. The book, it's just the mechanism holding their messages.
So by December, they decide they just can't live purely in the gap anymore. In this massive leap of faith, they both travel all the way across Europe, converging on a physical archive in Linz, Austria. Why? Just to request call number PR6052.A73V361961. They are finally going to hold the physical book that has completely consumed their lives for the past 6 weeks.
But when they open it, they aren't greeted by your standard prologue. Nope. Instead, there's a handwritten note from 1961 that explicitly demands their active participation. It reads, "This book is a letter. It was written to no one in particular and to everyone who opens it. Whoever answers completes it." It's literally a direct challenge from Imre to the reader.
As they sit there reading it together in the archive, they discover the book is exactly what they've built it up to be. It's 143 pages, consisting of 41 letters between two characters who are only identified as E and H. These characters are trying to reconstruct an absent text called Das Buch. Slowly, the characters realize they're actually writing to each other, not to the text itself. It all ends with character H naming what they've built together and E answering with silence. Because, as we know, silence is also an answer.
And then, the floor completely drops out. The big meta reveal. As they're reading, Mara and Thomas realize that E and H in this 1961 novel are doing exactly what they have been doing since November. E and H are essentially standing in for Mara and Thomas. Imre didn't just write a fiction story here. He basically wrote a blueprint for how two readers would eventually connect over his work.
It gets even crazier. They turn to the final isolated page of the book, and what they find is just a single paragraph. Astonishingly, it is the exact same paragraph that was quoted in the obscure footnotes that brought Mara and Thomas together in the first place. It perfectly describes two people meeting over a book they haven't read, arguing about it, and ultimately building a deep connection.
But wait, there's a catch. This final page has one recursive sentence right at the very end, a sentence that was conveniently missing from all their secondary sources. It simply reads, "It describes the correspondence exactly." Mind-blowing, right? This single line completely turns the book from a simple story into an open instruction. It creates this present continuous loop. It means the book is always constantly describing whoever happens to be reading it at that exact moment.
So it really begs the question, how on earth could Arel Imre write a template so phenomenally precise in 1961 that anyone following the path decades later would inevitably become the very characters he wrote about? I mean, reading the fragment, finding someone who disagrees, writing the letters, traveling to the archive. Was it magic? Or did Imre just have a flawless, downright scary understanding of human connection?
Fast forward a bit, let's track how this unfolds. The book is published in 1961, the secondary source pops up in 87, our duo connects in November, and they visit the archive in December. But months after that visit, the mystery deepens even further. Our narrative zeroes in on a plain white envelope that arrives in Mara's postbox in Thessaloniki on a random Tuesday in October. It's got an Austrian stamp, no return address, and handwriting she absolutely doesn't recognize.
Inside this October envelope is a single sheet of cream paper. And on it, the complete, unedited, original paragraph from Imre's book. It's the perfect composite of both Mara's and Thomas's sources, and it includes that missing final sentence. The fact that this was sent from an unknown source proves something pretty profound. It proves that even the partial transmission of a text, like literally just a corrupted footnote, still carries the full gravitational pull required to drag two people together.
Then, in a truly cinematic moment, Mara holds that cream paper up to the sunlight in her apartment, and she sees a hidden watermark pressed right into the page. It's just one word, completely invisible unless you hold it up to the light. Antworte. Answer. It is a direct, undeniable demand from the text itself, bridging decades of time to reach her.
And here's where the puzzle pieces snap together. This single watermarked word perfectly connects back to the hidden notes Thomas used to find in his great-uncle's stopped clocks back in Reykjavik. His great-uncle used to leave notes saying, "When du das liest, antworte mir." If you read this, answer me. Thomas realizes his great-uncle, or someone connected to him, might have actually sent that envelope. It's a beautiful realization that proves the correct response to an absence in our lives is never, ever silence. The correct response is correspondence. Every reader is a correspondent. And actually, I want to pause right here and remind you of the mechanics of what we are doing together, right now. You are inside the correspondence loop at this exact second. This explainer, the concepts we're covering, my voice, this is basically a letter addressed directly to you. You are standing on one side of the gap, and I'm standing over here on the other.
So I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought. The text has been delivered, the gap between us has been acknowledged, the forum is completely open, so what happens next? Now that you're a part of this correspondence, how will you answer?